You want to introduce yourself and then I'll go into it?
Or my name is Sandy Jimenez. I am here with the Options Institute, and with me today.
Good evening, guys. My name is Michael Gordon. I'm also with Options Institute, and this is what we do. We teach people financial aid. So we're going to go through financial aid with you all today, and hopefully give you a better understanding of what you're going to be doing with your students, with your children. I will probably refer to them as students throughout because it's where I'm comfortable, and I apologize for that. Just know when I say that I do mean your children. All right. Our agenda for today, we're going to start off talking about college costs and financial aid. Then we're going to look at the basics of FAFSA, or the free application for federal student aid. Then we're going to look at the process and steps around FAFSA. Then we're going to take a brief look at the TAP application and some basic information for that. We'll also look very briefly at the Jose Peralta Dream Act. I call it a crash course because we're just going to kind of give you what you need to know about it in order to use it, and why it's important and who it's important to. And then we'll take those questions that you guys are going to put into the Q&A, and we'll answer those for you. And we'll go through and give you some good information there. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. So the overview of college is, first and foremost, what is the cost of college and how do we figure that out? There are two main types of costs for college, and those are direct costs, which break down into these smaller categories. And we have tuition, fees, room, and board. And those are the typical costs of college that are considered direct costs. They're considered direct costs because they are paid directly to the school. I will explain to you in a moment one variation on that, but it's not super common, and I'll explain to you why it's done when we get there in just a moment. Moving on to the second portion of costs, we have our indirect costs, and those are the costs that our students have to pay, or that your children have to pay to survive and to live, but aren't necessarily going to the school itself. And that's going to be travel, books, school supplies, and personal supplies, the things that they need to survive and live and to be able to attend school. So with those costs in mind, I want to take a look at a school that students apply to and how those costs may break down. So we're going to take a look at CUNY Baruch today. And if you see Baruch, one of the things that's a little different about the way that this is set is you'll notice that the room and board for Baruch is put under indirect costs. That's because CUNY, for the most part, is a commuter college, but they do realize that students need to put into surviving, that you're paying for them to live. Even if it's your money, you the parent, you still have to pay something for them to live, and they consider that. So they consider that in the cost of attendance when looking at total cost of attendance. All right. So when we're looking at this information, something we need to know to understand what our students' financial need is and why we're doing this is what the expected family contribution is, also known as EFC. This is the amount of money that the federal government has said or believes that our students can pay based on information that we give them for 1 year of college. And we'll get in a little bit deeper as to what information that is. But this is what they do. And in order to find out what a student's need is and what their financial aid is what they're going to be required to have to cover as far as financial aid is concerned, we need to look at a couple of things. So we need to look at the cost of attendance, which we just figured out is the costs of indirect cost and direct cost combined. And then take away the EFC, the expected family contribution, from that. And what we end up with there is we end up having our students' need, or how much financial aid our students are going to be requiring in order to go to school. All right. So financial need, as I said, is going to be taking the cost of attendance and subtracting the EFC from that. And when we look at the cost of attendance for Baruch, the school we were just looking at, we see that 17,923 minus my sample student here, Mr. Joe Student, who has an EFC of $1,000. We take that away and we find out that this student's financial need is going to be $16,923. Sorry for my miniature coworker. He likes to break in from time to time. All right. So let's define financial aid a little bit. Financial aid is multiple things, but what we have from financial aid is we have grants, we have loans, we have federal work study, we have scholarships. Those are the main things that are parts of financial aid. And we're going to look next at where those forms of aid come from. So forms of financial aid come from three main sources: the federal government, the state government, in our case, New York State government, and the institutions themselves or the colleges have money as well. So when we think about this with the federal government, in order to access that money, we have to fill out the FAFSA. As I said before, the free application for federal student aid is FAFSA, and that's going to allow our students access to grants, loans, and work study. Then when we look at the state aid our students have available, we have to fill out our next form, which is going to be the TAP form, which stands for Tuition Assistance Program. And it accesses a TAP grant for our students. We'll get a little bit, when we get to the end of FAFSA and into TAP, I'll tell you why it's important to do one right after the other. But that's going to be a thing, is that with limited exceptions, we're going to want to do our TAP right after our FAFSA application. And that opens up the TAP grant, as well as several other grants and scholarships that are awarded by New York State Higher Education Servicing Corporation, and that are available to our students. If you want more information on the specifics of additional grants to see if your student or your child qualifies, you can go on their website and we will send the information out to access their website later. But you can go on their website to see what other possible money is out there for your child. And then lastly is the institutional level of funding. That's the college itself, the money that the college is going to give our students. And that's going to be with filing the FAFSA. Additionally, it may require filing of the CSS profile, which is another additional form to the FAFSA that private institutions will request from our students in order to determine how much money they're able to give them as well. And there also may be institutional forms as well as or in place of the CSS profile. So some schools may use both, or some schools may use one or the other. And that's going to open up access to our students to have grants, merit and need-based loans, and which is a lot less common. We don't really usually look at the loans through the school, although they do have, they are there in certain situations, and scholarships. And those scholarships are available to our students for many different reasons. All right. So now we're going to take a look at the basics of FAFSA. So FAFSA basics, things that you must know about FAFSA are that it is available on October 1st. FAFSA is a first come, first serve type of situation. They recommend that you do it as early as possible. There is technically no deadline. There is, however, deadlines at the schools. So while FAFSA itself can be completed anytime throughout the year, a school may have a deadline for it. So knowing those deadlines is important. We can list up to 10 colleges at a time on FAFSA. Don't worry if your student is applying to more than 10 schools. You can go back in later and change the schools once you start receiving your acceptances and figuring out where the student's going to go, to make sure that the school that they're going to go to, or the schools that they're considering, are able to give them the package and information that you need from financially. What we're looking at when it comes to the taxes for FAFSA is we're looking at prior. And what this means for prior year tax information is that your students are going to be attending for the 2021-2022 year. We're looking at our 2019 taxes because it's the year before, 2 years before their starting year. Students have to report their income. It doesn't matter if they made $500 or if they made $15,000, whether they filed taxes or not. Your student's income needs to go onto the FAFSA. Sandy, it's up to, the allowance on that is up to 6,000.
Yeah, the FAFSA has an allowance of about $900. So that means that if a student makes less than that, it'll basically not count towards the EFC. But it's still good to list the income. Also, it means that if a student makes 10,000, that they'll minus 6,900 from that, and that's what they'll count towards the EFC.
Thank you, Sandy. Sandy knows all my numbers. I'm very good at the approximate right around. She knows the dead ons. So thank you for that. IRS DRT. So we all know what the IRS is. DRT stands for Data Retrieval Tool. And what this is for students who are able to use it, it is a tool that allows you to grab the information from the IRS website and transfer it directly into the FAFSA application, essentially making it easier to fill out the information and not have to search for different financial aspects on your tax forms, speeding up the process, making it a little bit easier for us. So signing in the FAFSA can be done in two ways, with an FSA ID or with a signature page. Most of the time, and if able to, we're going to want to use the FSA ID. It's a digital signature, and it makes it easy and quicker for our students to have their forms looked at, evaluated, and fully submitted and done. The signature page is something that we would use if we have to. One of the times when we would use the signature page is when we're working with students who have undocumented parents and they're a citizen, and we need to print up a signature page for the parents to sign because they're not able to obtain an FSA ID. And I'm going to explain some more about that when we get a little deeper, which is the next section to come. So we're going to take a look now at the rules. So the rules of FAFSA. Let's start out with what is FAFSA. The FAFSA is the federal student aid form, the form that all federal student aid is based on. I left out a letter there. Real go me. It's the baseline for all other aid, and it can be accessed at www.fafsa.ed.gov. And again, the name of the application says it all. It is the free application for federal student aid. So you should not be paying to submit this form, and make sure that you're not. Before you can do FAFSA, you need to create your FSA ID. And what your FSA ID is going to be your new username and password to log into FAFSA, to sign FAFSA for both the student and the parent. So both student and parent need to obtain an FSA ID for each of you. At least one parent, if you live in a two-parent household, all three do not have to have an FSA ID to sign. We just need to have one parent able to provide that signature. And parents and students both need to have their own unique information. So you can't share an email address, you can't share phone numbers. They need to be separate, unique information there. All right, moving on to some first steps for FAFSA. So first steps for FAFSA, we're gonna take a look here at who should file FAFSA. Then we're gonna look at who is an independent student on FAFSA, so you know if you're working with a student who qualifies. We're gonna then look at who goes on FAFSA and figure out which parents go on there, which person's income goes on there, and all of that. Then we're gonna look at who's considered a parent on the FAFSA. Then we're gonna take a look at which parent goes on the FAFSA. So in the event that we're dealing with parents who are divorced or separated, whose income are you reporting? Excuse me. All right. So who should file FAFSA? Students eligible for filing of FAFSA are going to be our US citizens. Any US citizen is eligible to file FAFSA. Permanent residents, so green card holders, refugees and asylees. Students that are eligible for only institutional aid but still may be asked to file a FAFSA would be student visa holders for F1 and F2 visas, and exchange visitors with the J1 or J2 visitor visa holders, and our DACA students. So those they would be might be asked to file, and they may be asked to file FAFSA in order to access institutional aid. So who should not file FAFSA? If your student is undocumented, they are a student who should not be filing FAFSA, but hold on, don't leave yet, because I know that might scare anybody who might have a child who is undocumented. There is aid for students. We're going to talk briefly about that towards the end. New York State has opened up financial aid for your child if you have a child who falls under this circumstance. So don't be discouraged by the fact that FAFSA isn't available. I got your back still. All right. Who should file FAFSA? One more set of people is citizens with undocumented parents. So if you're a student sitting here right now and your parents are undocumented, but you're a citizen, you should file FAFSA. And your parents' information will go on that FAFSA. We're going to use their income information. If they have an ITIN number, that makes it easier. But if not, we're still going to report that information to FAFSA, to be honest. And if you have questions, we can answer some of that later and maybe in a more private situation. I understand that that's definitely a more private type of question to have. So we will definitely handle that appropriately. But if you have questions, reach out to a counselor for that. All right. We're going to take a look now at who's dependent versus an independent student. So dependent students versus independent students. Students are considered dependent unless they fall into very specific categories. Those categories are going to be students who are automatically considered independent students for the purposes of financial aid. A student who is over the age of 24. Yeah,
Can you slow down a little tiny bit? Thanks.
No problem. Sorry, thank you. So student who is automatically independent starts off with students who are 24 and over. Student who is married. So if a student has gotten married, they are considered independent. If your student is a graduate student, which I don't think is going to apply here, but good to know. Students who are supporting dependents, a student who is currently or has previously been in the military, the U.S. Armed Forces, a student who is in legal guardianship, and this may apply to some of the students that are here, I'm not sure, but it may. So if you're the legal guardian for a student, they're going to qualify as being independent. A student who is an orphan, in foster care, or a ward of the court after the age of 13. And this is anytime after the age of 13, and they don't have to still be under those circumstances to qualify as independent as long as they were after the age of 13 for any period of time. Something that's not going to come into play here is essentially is an emancipated minor, because New York does not have emancipation. An unaccompanied homeless youth is a category that could come in here, and that would be a student who is not with parents, and they're living either in a shelter or couch surfing or something like that. They're just not in a stable home living environment, and they don't have their parents with them. They're on their own in that situation. So, if that applies to you, that's definitely you should reach out to your counselor for extra assistance to understand how that affects you. All right. So when it comes to reporting income on the FAFSA, there are two categories: are dependent students and independent students. And with the dependent student, they're going to file on the FAFSA both their income and their parents' income. And we'll talk more about who a parent is shortly. For independent students, it's going to be their income. And if that student is married, which would be one of the limited circumstances that allows for independence, then they would put their spouse's income on their FAFSA as well. All right, who is considered a parent? According to FAFSA, a biological parent, an adoptive parent, or a step parent if they're married to an adoptive or a biological parent. So a person living in the home with a biological parent that is not married to them, so a boyfriend or even a fiance that is not married, is not going to go on to this form. Only a step parent who is legally married to a biological or adoptive. So who is not considered a parent? Basically anyone else. Unless they have legally adopted the student, nobody else qualifies as a parent. So no, the grandparent does not, foster parent, aunt, uncle, brother, sister, cousin, um, anybody that the student is living with. And I know I said that fast, so I will give translation a second to catch up. But anybody else that is not. So unless the person has legally adopted the student, if they're one of these other categories, unfortunately, they are not considered a parent for the FAFSA. Okay. Um, so which parent are we reporting when it comes to FAFSA? If we're talking about a single parent household, we're going to only report that one parent. And as I said before, just to be clear, a single parent who has a boyfriend or even a fiance in the home is going to only be reporting that one income, just the single parent's income. When you have two parents who are married to each other in the home, you're going to report both parents on their FAFSA. When you have two parents, a parent who is married to a step parent, and they are legally married, then you're going to report the parent and the step parent. And then when you have two parents who are not married to each other, but they live together and they are the biological parents, then you would report that. So mom and dad have been living together, but just never got married, but they are the biological mom and dad. That mom and dad living together will both report. So for the case where we are a single parent or a divorced or a separated parent, how do we decide which parent's income is going to be put on the FAFSA? So there's a couple of things that we consider. The first and foremost, the primary thing that matters is who does the student live with? Who is the custodial parent? Um, and that's who we should be putting. Now, I know because I'm in the situation where I split custody and I have my son as much as my wife has my son, my ex-wife has my son. And so I know that that happens. So in that case, we're going to take a look at which parent supports the student more financially. Um, and that's going to be the determining factor. Um, in the event that that can't be determined, there you should talk to your counselor and they would have information or can get the information on what the next step would be. All right. Sandy, anything you want to throw in? All right. Let's take a look at the bonus slide for this section, household size. So when we're looking at household size, the parent or parents and the student, parents, other children, so your younger siblings are definitely going on. But if you have an older sibling that maybe is at college or that you're providing more than half of their support still, then you can also consider them as a part of the household. Um, Other people, if they live with the parent and the parent provides more than half of the support, and the parent will continue to provide more than half of their support, they may also be included on the FAFSA. All right. Now we're going to go into some highlights for FAFSA and just some things that we should know. All right. So students' name must be written and spelled exactly as it appears on their social security card. Students need to have or create a working email address and check it regularly. I would be willing to assume that they have one through school and that's where they're being encouraged, the one that they're being encouraged to use. I'm getting the thumbs up, so I know I'm right. So yeah, the one that they have from their school is going to be the email that they should be encouraged to keep an eye on and check. If they can add that to their phone, have them do that so that they don't miss anything. A lot of important information comes through there as far as acceptances. Maybe they missed something that they need to add on an application. And FAFSA too. FAFSA sends out saying, hey, you made a mistake here, or maybe you made a mistake here. Check this out and see. So we want to make sure that our students are accessing that and have the ability. And for our non-citizens who are eligible to file the FAFSA, they're going to need their non-citizen registration information and their alien number. So if they make sure that you guys have that on hand and accessible when you're ready to do your FAFSA. For students who are citizens, obviously, we're going to need your social security number. So social security card would be need to be handy.
Not, Michael, non-citizens
Yes.
also will have a social security number as well. The eligible ones.
Yes. Thank you, Sandy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for our students, for your children who are males, they need to be registered for or registered for selective service to receive federal aid. And there is a place on the application that the students can do so. So in the box asking for, there will be a box that asks your student, are they registered with the selective service? If they are not, or if you're not sure, you'll click no, and it will ask if you would like to register for the selective service, and you will click yes. This question will only appear for male students. So when you indicate if you're male or female, you will get this question based on that indication. Students should check yes in the box indicating interest in work study. Work study makes up a very small portion of financial aid, but if your student is able to get it, then they should absolutely take it, and definitely indicate that they're interested in it if they're able to get it. And again, just to reiterate something that we touched on earlier, you can enter a maximum of 10 schools on the form at a time. You can go back in and edit the form if need be. Right. So FAFSA, continuing with FAFSA highlights, answering questions about assets and property. Estimate low when you're answering these questions on your checking and savings account due to fluctuation. Report income property only, not your primary residence. Don't report the home you live in. Only report homes that you are using to make income off of. If you own rental properties or other such. And report only businesses with more than 100 employees. Students' income is expected to be reported. I know I've said this earlier, but again, it's important that we are being accurate with these forms. We need to make sure that they have an accurate picture of our student and being honest. We don't want to have a hiccup that causes a student not to get aid because they found something that was inaccurate. All right. And then submitting FAFSA, your FSA ID is your signature. You know, if you and your parent can have your FSA ID and sign it, you don't have to worry about printing anything. And then after you're done signing, you're going to receive a confirmation page, and that's going to give you a link to file your state aid, which I'm going to jump deeper into momentarily. But I just want to touch on that now. So when you finish with that, you're going to get that page. If you scroll down, it's going to say, would you like to start your New York State application or your New York State aid application? I don't know the exact words, but it'll be a link that will link you right into the application for New York State aid. And the next slide I want to show you is what's called the student aid report. And in the student aid report, what's most important to highlight and show you here is going to be the EFC right here that I'm going over with the laser pointer. If you see that number here, that's going to be the amount of money that the government says that you're able to contribute to 1 year of your student's education. And it may be any variant of numbers depending on your income, your household size, and the information that you provide to FAFSA. Um, the this also has an indication that that may be an asterisk where this C is, that would indicate that your student may be getting verified. Verification I'm going to talk briefly about on the next slide. I would be willing to say that even if you don't have an asterisk there, just be prepared for the possibility of getting verified and having to provide additional information. And I'm going to tell you some of that on this next slide here. So verification can happen for many reasons. And there's no rhyme or reason to that. It can be so many different things. Students have to complete forms promptly. There's time limits and things that need to be done in a timely manner. And they may be required to verify tax information. They may they may request a student to submit their tax transcript. Um, they may, or any set things for tax information documents that will help them to see or non-filer status if you claim that you're not filing, things that will just show them that the information that you have given them is true and accurate. And it again happens for any number of reasons. And I am going to be skipping my next slide because we're going to take questions at the end, and I had a section of questions there, but we'll take them all at the end. So we're going to look at the TAP program very briefly here. Again, the TAP program is Tuition Assistance Program. It's the New York State aid. And at the end of your FAFSA application, if you're filing FAFSA, please do go right into TAP. It will make your life a lot easier. It gives you easy access to the TAP application, and it pulls the information that you've already went through with FAFSA and put in. As much of it as it can use, it pulls it into the TAP application. So you just have to verify the information is correct and maybe add a couple of small details, and then add your tax information from your New York State tax. So some TAP facts. It's administered by HESC, the Higher Education Servicing Corporation. You must file FAFSA first, with the exception for undocumented students, which we're going to get into in just a few moments. Student ID is required for this. This is a new thing. Don't get worried about it. It is required, but it does not have to be done to complete this form. It could be added in later on. So you can skip this page of the form and come back later and add the student ID. But once the student has their student ID for the school that they're going to be attending, they will be required to add that in there. As well as FAFSA, it is also available on October 1st. This is going to be focused on New York State income taxes. So it's your IT 201 tax form. Is the standard one. There may be variations. And so with verification, something I didn't mention, I apologize. With verification for FAFSA, FAFSA verification is done through the college. TAP does verification. HESC does verification for itself for TAP. So if you get verified by both, you're going to have two different processes to go through for each one. All right. A couple of more things about TAP. Unlike the FAFSA, you can only put one college at a time on the TAP application. So you're going to put a college in there. And again, don't worry, because you can go back in and change that when your student has an idea of where they're going to go. And then the definition of independent is vastly different on TAP in some ways, especially when it comes to the age aspect of TAP. TAP will allow students up to the age of 36, is it, Sandy? 36 is
35.
where they consider 35. 35 is automatic independence. I apologize. Again, Sandy's the perfect numbers. And then, so in New York, common law marriage does not exist. So the two parents living together is a little bit different of a situation for filing the TAP application if they're not married. And then extra step for our CUP families. CUP is citizens with undocumented parents, just to backtrack to with that reference earlier. So again, we with CUP students, we would have to print and sign a signature page. TAP is allowing students to upload that page this year, so we can upload the information instead of having to sign it and mail it in. Um, okay. I'm gonna jump into the Jose Peralta Dream Act. So if you're working, if your child is undocumented, or if you're listening to this now and you're undocumented, please listen carefully because this applies to you, and this is where you're going to be able to access some financial aid that New York State would like to give to you. So you know, I want to help you guys to understand this as best I can. Um, I'm going to do as much as I can for this in the next few minutes to make sure we can get through this and get some Q&A in. So students whose permanent home is New York State and who meet the following immigration status criteria: they are either a T or U visa holder. They are an individual granted temporary protective status, or TPS. They're an individual without lawful immigration status. This includes students with expired visas, expired TPS, and expired DACA, and any students who are here under any other circumstances for whatever reason that you're considered an undocumented student. This is where you are, and then students with DACA status. Also, students who live outside of New York. Um, can qualify for this under circumstances as well. So students whose permanent residence is not in New York State who meet the following criteria. So the difference here that you're going to notice is that students outside of New York who are permanent residents, permanent lawful residents, and who are US citizens also are given access to it if they do not live here, but they have to meet one of the following requirements as well. So if you fall under one of the statuses that I've spoken about, and you also fall under one of the statuses on this page, which is is going to be your educational requirement. You are New York State high school attendant for 2 years or more, graduate from a New York State high school, and enroll in a New York State college program undergraduate within 5 years. Or you take a New York State high school equivalency, GED, task, whatever you refer to it as. I'm a little older, so I still tend to lean towards GED by accident. But if you get a high school equivalency and then you enroll in a New York State college, undergraduate within 5 years, or you're charged New York State in-state tuition for any reason at a CUNY or a SUNY college. If you fall under these statuses and you meet these educational requirements, you have access now to go in and file for financial aid through the TAP application. And this is a different route to get to it than going through FAFSA and then clicking in the way that you normally would. So this is opening up financial aid to students, and while it isn't opening up the federal aid, New York State is still working on giving students aid to help students to attend state institutions. Now, please note that this is for state institutions. It's for our CUNYs and our SUNYs. It's not accessible for our private schools, with very limited exceptions. Sandy?
Michael, it is accessible at private institutions.
Oh, is it?
As well.
Oh, I'm wrong. Oh, I apologize. My fault. Um, so it's accept, but this is opening it up for our students to be able to access that money that New York State has available for them. That prior to last July was not there for them. So this is huge. I was ecstatic when this opened up, and If this applies to anyone, please take advantage of it. Please speak to a counselor in order to get some assistance with it, because it's a little bit different than just doing your TAP application, and you're gonna have some steps that you need to do as far as submitting some information to show your school has that you've been in the school for the 2 years, or and then also to show graduation. But if I'm not mistaken, HESC is now able to pull that automatically, the graduation, but we do need to show the transcripts showing the school history. They'll be able to pull students' final transcript. And in the event that they have difficulty with that, they have said that they will reach out to students in order to let them know, hey, we need this from you because we couldn't get it for whatever the reason was. So your students aren't going to just be left in the dark, not knowing if this is there. Also on their site, they are able to see the status of their applications. So they have that ability as well. And this actually brings us to the end of our presentation and to our Q&A. So I'm going to end sharing of my screen. And
I will take it from here. Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. I wanted to say something before we all got started, and then we kind of got started. But of course, the main reason we're applying for FAFSA is our kids are going to college. We have some of our seniors who are actually starting to apply this Sunday, November 1st. So we're really, really excited about that, all my early action kids. So if you, as a parent, have any questions about your students' college applications, please reach out to their counselor. We've been working very closely with them one-on-one about their applications, their college choices, all that really great stuff. So if you can believe it, Sunday is already November 1st. So we already have kids submitting stuff then. I will share my screen. We actually got some really good questions, and I will be transparent, and I added some of my own. So we will, we shall be on as well.
Your questions we should make you come through training for your questions.
Listen, these are questions that I know students have to ask. They're just too shy to ask. So that's why I did it.
Love it. No worries.
Screen, give me 1 second. Okay. Does everyone see? Hold on a second. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to share the right screen. That should work. Do we see the questions or no?
Yes.
We see them. Oh, not anymore.
Not anymore.
Oh, it did? Okay, it didn't look like it on mine, but I guess it did. I have two screens, so sometimes it gets a little confusing. Okay, you like me. The questions?
Yes.
So my first question on here is about the CSS profile. If anyone wants to talk about that.
I'll talk about it.
Yeah, Sandy, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah. How do you fill out the CSS profile? So just to back up a little bit, as Michael said, the CSS profile is it's a financial aid form for aid from the colleges directly. So this form is managed by the college board. Those are the same people that manage the SAT. So they're our friends. We've known them for a while, perhaps. So the way you would fill it out is you would go on the collegeboard.com website and you would fill it out there, right? You would use your account, the student's account, to complete that application. But you only do it if the colleges you are applying to require it, because it's not a free form. It costs some money. So for the first school, it costs $25. And for every following school, I believe it's something like $16, something like that. But anyway, it adds up. It adds up. So it's really important to check that the college you are applying to requires this form. And it's very similar in what it's requesting to the FAFSA. It asks a lot of questions in order for the colleges to decide who to give their money to, right? So it's usually required from schools that have money to give away. And they say, they're asking questions about income, household size, assets, so how much money you have in the bank, but also your investments, the value of your home and your business. So it's sort of like all the questions Michael mentioned for the FAFSA times 2. It asks a lot of questions, but don't be afraid. It's a really, it can be a really important form. If you don't have a lot of income and assets, it uses skip logic and it lets you skip those questions. But if you do have a lot of income and assets, it's a great way to let the colleges know what your income situation really is like. It lets you also talk about expenses. And that's really important for some of us middle income families to be able to represent to colleges. It's an important form. So find out about it. It asks a lot of questions. There's so much more. We could talk about it for an hour, but I'm gonna leave it there, if that's okay.
And I was going to say, our students get fee waivers through SAT School Day from last year, so I do not believe they have to pay for the CSS profile, from what I remember from kids doing it last year.
Correct. If you have a fee waiver, then it's free, but you still can only fill it out if your colleges require it. So you still got to check.
And again, just to direct you in the right place, that's going to be through College Board. So you'll go to the College Board's website to access that if you are required to utilize it.
Our next question, does the legal guardian have to report their income on the FAFSA?
No. If you're in a legal guardianship and your student is considered independent, the student is considered independent and the legal guardian's information does not go on the FAFSA.
Is there a difference between guardianship and legal custody?
That's a funny question. We've been looking into this forever, the last couple of weeks. So we found out, because we've been doing research, there is a difference between legal guardianship and legal custody. Generally, legal custody is handled, it's between parents perhaps. So maybe like, we're divorced and I've got legal custody of my kids, or he's got legal custody of his kids. That's one way it's used. Another way it's used is a temporary arrangement. So maybe we heard the example of a mom who went into the armed forces, and while she was deployed, she left her child in the legal custody of her mom, but her parental rights were not ever terminated. When you're in a legal guardianship, the parental rights of the parent were terminated. So this person has complete guardianship of the student, and they're able to make all the decisions for the student. That's why a student in a legal guardianship does not have to provide parental information. So just to say again, a legal guardianship means that the parental rights were ended. So that student does not have to provide their parents' information. A legal guardianship, it's not the case that it was the parental
Custody.
rights were terminated. They were not terminated. So they still do generally have to provide their parent information. If you have something that's a little different from what I described, then you should speak to your counselor, right? But that's generally what the difference is.
How do I get a FAFSA ID?
So I'm going to take at least the next 2 questions because I want the next one after this. FSA ID. So you're going to go to fsaid.ed.gov. You're going to have your social security information handy. So a social security card. You're going to have your personal information handy. You're going to have an email address. It's helpful to have a cell phone number, but it's not required, but at least an email address. And that's all you need. So again, that's fsaid.ed.gov. Okay, so when I fill out the FAFSA, my mom claims me. So I enter her information from the tax form. Is that correct? the question here is, do you live with your mom? If you live with your mom and your mom claims you, then yes. If you live with your dad, but for some reason mom claims you on taxes, then you're putting your dad's information on. It's who you live with.
Yeah, I think
'Cause
that also answers the next question too, Michael. What if my parents are separated and neither one's married? It's whoever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the parent that you live with, your custodial parent, the parent who has you most of the time, more than 50%. And again, if your parents split custody and you are with them both equally, then you'll have to have a conversation with them to figure out which one of them provides more financial support.
Right. And as Mallory was getting at, if the parent you live with is remarried, then you list that person too. But if not, then you don't.
So the next question is about, do we need to report child support? If so, do we report the amount for that specific student applying for FAFSA, or the total amount for all children getting child support in the household?
I'll take that. You do report child support on the FAFSA, and you report it for all the children in the household.
So that, I'm just repeating that question. It was just about child support, and Sandy, I'm sorry, Sandy, can you repeat your answer?
Yes, so you do report child support on the FAFSA, and you report it for all the children in the household.
Okay. So this question, maybe I found a little confusing. You guys can kind of figure it out too. But if someone, like a parent's sibling, lives in the home and the parent provides for them, can you include them and their income?
I get this. So uncle or aunt is living in the home and the parent is providing the support, and they're not it seems like, from, if I'm gathering correctly, they're not working, they're not bringing anything in. If I'm correct, and Sandy will correct me if I'm wrong, they would consider them as a member of the household for household size, as long as they're providing more than 50% of the support to that person living there.
Right, right. So just to say again, as long as the parent is providing more than 50% of the support to their sibling, for example, then they would be counted in the household. But you wouldn't include the sibling's income. That's the difference, right? The income, so for a dependent student, the only income that goes on the FAFSA is theirs and their parents. Nobody else's can go on there.
So just to sum up, basically, if a parent has their brother living with them and they support them, they list them in the household, but don't report their income.
Correct.
Someone asked, don't you have to be 18 years old to register for selective service? And why? What is selective service and why only males?
I'll take that. Why not? Let's go. Okay, so I'm gonna hit what is selective service and why only males first. What selective service is in times of war, in the event that we had a draft, the selective service is what our government uses to draft people. Why only males? That I can't answer. It's a great question. Actually, there's been movement towards including women in this, but as of right now, it's been only males for a very long time, since it's for the entirety of our country's existence, and it's an outdated law in place. That's the only thing I can give you for why. And then, why, yes, you do have to be 18. And until you turn 18, you won't actually be registered. But when you click to register for selective service on here, it's registering you upon you turning 18. So if you're filing this and you're 17 still, you're indicating that when you turn 18, they can register you for selective service.
Okay. What is the IRS data retrieval tool? How do I use it?
So the IRS data retrieval tool is a tool that you can use on your FAFSA to transfer information from your taxes. And parents can use it using their FSA ID, and students can use it too. Not everyone will get this option. For example, undocumented parents cannot use it, and a number of other people cannot use it. But if you use it, it'll transfer all the information that the FAFSA asks about taxes into your FAFSA, and then you won't have to type it in. And all that information the colleges will know is true information because it came directly from your taxes. So it's a good way to save time while you're filing your FAFSA, and save time in that you will not get as many requests for verification of that information.
Good. Next question. My grandma is my legal guardian, but I have contact with my parent. Is it more in my benefit to be an independent or dependent student?
If you have a legal guardian, you are independent. So you don't have to put your mom's information if you are in contact with her.
I asked this question because I've heard in the past, sometimes it's actually in the student's detriment to be independent, listed as independent, where they won't get as much money. So I asked this question.
Right, but not in this case. There's certain statuses that are more flexible. Legal guardian, I've never seen a student not choose to put legal guardianship. An example might be where Michael had told us about youth in foster care. That's after the age of 13. A lot of times they'll be in foster care for a short amount of time, and then it'll change, their status will change. They'll become reunited with their family. Those students have an interesting choice because yes, they were in foster care at some point after the age of 13, but maybe they're not anymore. So they can say, you know what? I worked really hard to get back with my parent. I don't want to put that down anymore. The question for legal guardianship has to do with right now. Right now, are you in a legal guardianship? And if you are, then you're independent. I suppose you can skip that. That's fine, but I've actually never seen anybody do it. There are differences. So students that are independent sometimes will be eligible for more loans. And sometimes, although not in the case of legal guardianships, may be eligible for less TAP, but not in this case. In other cases though, so some people might say, I don't fit into any of these categories that Michael described, but I still can't put my mom's information. Or maybe I want to get more financial aid, so I'm going to pretend that I'm independent. In those cases, those students, if they're able to convince somebody they're independent, will definitely get less money in TAP.
And to follow up on that, if they are independent due to grandparent having custody, does the grandparent income get reported on the FAFSA?
So remember, custody is different, but never do you put your grandparents' income on the FAFSA. Only your biological, adoptive, or step parents go on the FAFSA. If you're a dependent student, there's never a case where your grandma's income will go on there unless she's adopted you.
About to say never, Sandy. If she adopts you, then grandma goes on.
That's
the only way.
She adopted you. If
Only
she
way.
didn't adopt you, then there's not a case. You won't put your grandma, your big brother, your uncle, anybody that is not your biological, adoptive, or step parent.
Okay. I know I have a case of a student who they don't live with their parent, but they live with an aunt, but they're not in a legal guardianship, but they have no contact with their parent.
So that's different. And that's something, if somebody has something like that, then they need to talk to you. Because that's, I don't think we're going to go into that in great detail, but that's a separate appeal process that they'll have to engage in so that they won't have to put parental information. It's very long and detailed, but in some cases, it may be the right thing to do. Again, that student will be eligible for less TAP. But if it's the truth, there's nothing you can do about it. Then you will help them through the process, and it's called a dependency override.
Is there a deadline for TAP?
There is a
Nope.
deadline for TAP and for FAFSA, but it's so far away, I don't even want you to think about it.
Not
Don't
anything
think
that
about it,
impacts
just
us.
do it ASAP, ASAP.
Good advice. I like that advice.
Yeah, I mean, October 1st is when these applications open up. We're doing them with taxes from last year anyway. There's no reason not to get them done and out of the way. And this way our schools can start to put our financial aid packages together once they decide they want us.
And that was a question, again, which year income tax do you use?
So for this year, we're using 2019. That's the prior. So you're entering 2021 semester, you're using 2 years prior, so 2019 for this year.
Someone asked, what if both parents have joint custody? Who claims? Which I think is more of a tax question. But I think you guys kind of answered whose parent they use. We can just.
Yeah, I mean, joint custody comes down to, I mean, having joint custody doesn't necessarily mean that the time is being split 50-50. Joint custody has so many different variations, so it really is going to come down to who do you live with the most? Who do you spend more time in their home? And they're going to be the custodial parent in that situation.
And if a student says they live with each parent 50%,
who provides more financial support?
does the order of the colleges matter? Does it affect acceptances?
No, it doesn't matter. It used to. Colleges have no idea what order that you put them in, nor do they know what other colleges you put on the FAFSA. So just put, my rule is to put, pay attention to deadlines and put the schools with the earliest deadlines first. And then, follow along with whatever other colleges.
Do you pay back FAFSA, TAP, or loans?
That's a tricky question. You do not pay back FAFSA, the funds that you receive from the Pell Grant. You do not pay back TAP, but you do pay back loans. It's a loan. Any loan you take out, anything that has the word loan is going to be repaid. So be careful with loans. Definitely, have some conversations with your counselors when it comes to making the decision to take out loans to see if it's going to be a viable opportunity for you to do to get the education, and if the opportunity cost and the cost is going to balance out or not in taking out those loans.
Someone asked, what if I have one parent who lives in this country and one parent who lives in another country?
So for that case, you sort of have a choice. It's a conversation to have in your family. If your parents consider themselves separated, you only have to put the parent who you live with the most, which is probably the parent in this country right now. But if your parents don't want to do that, and we've had plenty families that say this, they want to be considered married, then you would put the income of both parents. So you would put the income of the one that lives here as normal, but the one that lives in another country, For example, if they make money, my family's from the Dominican Republic. So if they make money in the Dominican Republic, then I would get an idea of how much money do they make there. And then I would translate it into US dollars.
So an extra step, basically, just to
A
go.
little bit of an extra step, but generally, generally is, I would consider that a separated parents, and I would just put the one I live with.
Someone asked, do you pay per school? I don't know what that was in reference to.
So for FAFSA and TAP, it's free no matter how many schools you apply to. For CSS profile, yes, you do. You pay per school unless you have, as Mallory reminded us, a fee waiver. If you have a fee waiver, you don't pay for nothing. But if you don't have a fee waiver, you pay for how many schools you put on the profile. Remember, we're only putting on the profile colleges that require it.
Thank you, Ms. Samru. It was the CSS profile that she was asking about. Someone asked, if I live with both parents and they file separately, whose info do I put on the FAFSA?
So if you live with both parents and they file separately, parents filing separately, you're still living with both of your biological parents. So you're putting both parents on your FAFSA.
Yeah, I get that question a lot too. My parents file separately. Can I just do one? You have to go both. It's just how it kind of is. So we don't have any more questions left in the Q&A, unless anyone types anything last minute that's burning they have to ask. But again, everyone, I recorded this whole session. We will share it out when we get the recording available. And so you'll be able to rewatch this, send it to anyone who wasn't able to make it. Any questions you have, maybe you wake up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. and think of a question, please email your counselor, and we will make sure to get those questions answered for you. We will also be posting materials on our website. Our lovely presenters have shared with us some materials on our website that we will be able to post that has some more details. I believe there's a FAFSA checklist in there, which is always very helpful of things you need to include for the FAFSA. We will also have some materials in Spanish that are actually made by FAFSA themselves. So we will post those as well, all on our beautiful website. I also would like to remind families and students to please read the newsletter that I send out. Every 2 weeks, I send out a newsletter, and it has a ton of really good information. Scholarships, it has any updates with FAFSA, it has when scholarships open up, anything like that. It's very, very important to read. So, we keep talking about free money. Scholarships are free money. You don't have to pay them back. So we want everyone to apply to those. And the Spanish recording was also taped as well, and we will share that out as well. But I think that's good for now. I want to thank our lovely presenters for joining us tonight and educating our families on financial aid. I think parents are excited to kind of see someone on the outside really talking and who's an expert. And thank you guys for everyone. And
there's a question that I'm not sure what they mean in the Q&A.
Okay.
It says they're asking, so there's no difference for CUNY schools. I don't know what exactly you're referring to, and I'd love to answer the question, but I need a little bit more detail.
I didn't even see that question.
No worries. I have it open on my second screen.
Oh, that's why. They're probably asking for the financial aid.
There's no different forms. The only different forms that you might have to fill out would be if you were applying with needing to do the CSS profile or another supplemental form. But for CUNY and SUNY, you're going to get your TAP application and your FAFSA application financial aid wise.
And sometimes those schools, and look out for it, will send verification forms as well. Make sure you keep your eyes open for those.
Okay. And I would like to thank Ms. Strahy for translating for us so beautifully. This was a great help for a lot of our families. We all know accessibility is huge, especially with financial aid. And with that said, thank you everyone, and everyone have an amazing Thursday and an amazing weekend.
Thank you, Goddard Institute. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Thank you, Ms. Levy. Thank you, Ms. Strays.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you, guys.
Bye. I see something in the Q&A that says the website has an outage.
I don't see that.
Wonder what website that is.
As Marlon said, thank you.
I saw. Thank you so much. I hope that went really well. I really, really appreciate it. I know this is the first webinar. Did you guys have any questions for us or comments or anything like that?
No, it would be great, just like I said, to get the final count of folks that
How many?
attend.